Introducing the 500mm F4.5 DG APO HSM prime lens. With a large aperture, high-speed super telephoto lens, inner focusing system technology. Introducing the Sigma 500mm F4.5 DG APO HSM ultra telephoto prime lens, designed for full frame sensors, but may also be used with smaller APS-C size sensors. The lens incorporates autofocus and manual focus, and it gives you a limitation on the limiter on focus, such as full, 8 meters to infinity and 4 to 8 meters. Very handy for sports and wildlife photography. The 500mm is a unique focal length, and its large fixed aperture of 4.5 makes it great for photographing wildlife. A hypersonic motor, HSM abbreviated, ensure quite accurate and high-speed autofocusing, working together with an inner focusing system which enables additional speed and responsiveness while their overall length does not change during focusing. The minimum focusing distance is 400 centimeters or 157.5 inches. The lens includes a rear insertion 46mm filters with provision for easy rotation of polarizing filters. The tripod collar on this lens is unique. It has contoured grooves in the actual mount for easy hand holding. The actual mount screw itself secures very tightly and is very easily adjusted. The lens construction is 11 elements in 8 groups with an angle of view 5 degrees at 500mm. Surprisingly compact for its focal length, the 500mm is approximately 14 inches long and weighs slightly less than 7 pounds or just over 3 kilograms. The minimum aperture is f/32. Featuring 2 ELD extraordinary low dispersion glass elements provide optimum color correction and sharpness throughout the entire zoom range, and a new multi-layer lens coating technology and lens design formula reduce flare and ghosting. Designed for full frame sensors, but may also be used with smaller APS-C size sensors with a corresponding effective increase in focal length, 750mm in most cameras. Also compatible with the Sigma APO Tele Converters to provide additional focal length as a 700mm f8 or 1000mm f11 lens. So finally, let's talk about the build quality. The 500mm Sigma prime lens F4.5 DG HSM. It is built like a tank. It is fantastic build quality. It is made out of steel, heavy durable materials, and it will survive drops. It is fantastic, highly recommended, and thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. This is part 2 of my overall review of the Sigma 500mm EXDG for f4.5 prime lens. So in this video I'm going to briefly talk about the lens, why I think it's really good, and I'll show you some examples at the end. And this is a video that quite a few people have requested, so hopefully this video will be informative. So how much does the lens weigh? It weighs about 3 kilograms, the same weight as the 150 to 600 sports lens, so it weighs the same. I'd probably say it's probably quite a bit sharper because it's a prime lens, I did say it has a zoom focal range in my last video, but I was just reading off what Sigma said. It's a fixed focal length lens, so it doesn't zoom, just keep that in mind. It has a max aperture of F4.5, so it lets in a lot more light than the Sigma contemporary or sport lenses. In terms of elements, it has 11 elements in 8 groups versus the contemporary and sport 150 to 600 zoom lenses. The contemporary has 20 elements in 14 groups, and the sports lens has 24 elements in 16 groups, so a lot more elements there. Obviously, the less elements you have, the more light gets transmitted. It does have 2 SLD low dispersion elements in the lens. Build quality, I would say it's really rugged and very well made. It seems to be made completely out of metals, unlike the Sigma contemporary and sport lens. The sport lens does have a lot of aluminium in it. However, I wouldn't say it's quite as durable as this in terms of build quality. Now, in the day when you could buy one of these lenses, it doesn't have image stabilization, keep that in mind. I'm not fond of Sigma's image stabilization because it doesn't tend to be that great, versus Canon and Tamron and Nikon's versions of the image stabilization. It does have a drop-in filter. You can put in 46mm filters in there, and it has a rotation barrel there that allows you to rotate the actual polarizer, which is really handy, and then obviously it slots back in there. Its minimum focus obviously is quite long at 4 meters, and it goes all the way. It has 3 modes basically: 8 meters to infinity, full, and 4 to 8 meters. Has full-time manual focus. And actually has a selector mode there for manual autofocus and manual mode, obviously. The actual tripod mount is really nice because it has contoured grooves. If you've seen my introduction video, you'll be able to see that close up. But it's really handy for carrying around. It is really comfortable in the hand. Unlike Canon's prime lens that is just quite flat and solid, it's not, I would say, as comfortable to hold as this is. And there is multiple screw-in mounts on there, like a 1/4 inch and your standard normal threads for your tripod mounts. It is a big lens and it is heavy, so it will become quite tiring for a while. After a while, the actual mount itself is easily rotated to portrait mode or landscape mode, whichever you want to do. So it is quite handy. Focusing is quite quick. In low light it's pretty good. In terms of image quality, I'd say it's pretty much on par with the contemporary sport lens in quality. When I did some testing, I found the lenses more or less comparable in quality. Obviously, if you stop this lens to f8, your images significantly become more sharper, and in that respect, because it's a prime lens, it easily beats the Sigma contemporary and sport lens, easily. Obviously, you've got no image stabilization, but I found Sigma's image stabilization to be quite poor, if I'm honest with you. I tested that on the Sigma contemporary and sport lens and the 17 to 50 standard EX zoom lens that I had. I found image stabilization, while they rated it at 4 stops, I was more, in real world examples, I was only getting about 1 stop, maybe 2 at a push. Even Canon's basic 300 f4 lens gives you 2, and that gives you 2 stops. You know, when Canon says they give you 2 stops, you get 2 stops. With the other lens that I tested, the 100 to 400 Mark II lens, sharpness on that was pretty good, obviously, but I found the image stabilization on that lens at 4 stops to be 4 stops. So when it comes to image stabilization, I'm not a big fan of Sigma when it comes to that. So don't be too concerned about getting a lens that doesn't have image stabilization. Use a tripod, monopod, and you get around that. And really, talking about the build quality, it's really solid. I have no qualms over the build quality, the condition. This particular lens, it cost me about £1,500, so you can pick them quite cheap. Try and get yourself a good copy because some of them are well beat up, and some companies do try and sell them for £1,500 in poor condition. You really want to be spending £1,500 in good condition. And if you're someone who's into wildlife, 500mm prime is the end goal to get a lens like this. I'm going to show you some examples now, but I just wanted to briefly talk about the lens and give you an idea of how good I think it is. It comes with a decent lens hood, which is all made out of metal, very solid, a little bit of rubber on the end, just like the Sport one. The only thing I think about it that's negative, it's a bit on the short side. It could do with being a bit longer, but all in all, I think if you're looking for a prime lens to do wildlife photography and you can't afford the Canons, and you're a little bit put off the actual tele zoom lenses, because we all know prime lenses are sharper than zooms, I don't think you would go too wrong with getting a lens like this. So I want to jump to the examples I've got to show you image comparisons. There's not a lot in it really. I really think anyone would be really impressed with this lens. It does become heavy after a while because it is 3 kilograms, and ironically it weighs the same. And I did some weighing. I did a weighing video, if you want to check that out, where I weighed in the 100-400 Mark II, the Contemporary 150-600 and the Sport 150-600. The Sport weighs 3 kilograms and this weighs the same. I found it really surprising that it weighed the same as an older lens. I eventually decided to sell the 150-600 Contemporary. I did want to keep the Sport version of it, but I just felt it was a bit too heavy. And after using the Contemporary while I was blown away with image quality, I found Sigma's image stabilization, or optical stabilizer as Sigma call it, quite poor. You're more than free to see another YouTuber which I recommend you watch, called Angry Photographer. His name's Ken. He's done some videos on Sigma and he doesn't really rate Sigma lenses that well because he has done some repair teardowns on them to see how they tick. What he has basically said is you'll find a Canon lens or a Nikon lens or a Tamron lens that's been around for a while, still working, but you'll be hard pressed to find a Sigma lens. There are a few exceptions to that. I think this lens certainly qualifies as an exception because this is quite an old lens now, but you can still pick them up functioning, working well. This particular lens I sent to Sigma to get a repair done on the contact block, because the contact block was a bit worn out, and I got the lens cleaned out. So that cost £250. Yes, it is a bit of an expense, and it is quite expensive for such a big lens. However, sometimes it can be worth it to make sure there's no fungus issues with a used lens. So let's get on to the examples, and hopefully this video was helpful. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video I just want to assess some images I've taken with the prime 500mm DG APO HSM 500mm F4.5 lens from Sigma. So we're going to assess some images here. Hopefully it'll be a little bit helpful. Some of you guys have requested that I do some, or take some pictures ranging from F4.5, which is the maximum the aperture can open up to F8, and give you a comparison between the two. So I've taken a picture here of one of those bears that you can get from Compare the supermarket, and as you can see the nose is in focus, however the eyes are not. Now when you're talking about an aperture or 500mm at f4.5, the difference in terms of the focus is going to be very small. So to nail your focus, you're going to be need to be very precise with these extreme apertures. So as you can see, it's not quite in focus at f4.5. However, when we take a similar image to that, we'll be able to get the eyes in focus at f8. But let's just have a look at the image in more detail. As you can see, the bokeh effect is really good, and it does, when you're talking 500mm, it does blow out the background a lot more than you would expect, say a 70-200 or a 24-70. So extreme magnifications can sometimes give you bokeh that might seem it's come from a lens of like f1.2 or something like that. That's the effect of focal length on bokeh basically. So as you can see in this picture, we've got the nose bang on focus. Exposure is pretty good. Image quality is really nice. I like it, and I don't see any problems with it. Just for you peeper watchers out there, we'll just zoom in significantly into this. We're at 50% now. 100%. It's quite sharp. Let's just have a look at the image info. Now we're running at 400th of a second, 1600 ISO on a 5D Mark II. All these pictures are taken on a 5D Mark II in RAW. Obviously you're going to see a bit of noise in there because it is 1600 ISO, but it's pretty good. Let's move to the next image. So basically it's the same image, but we've changed it to f8 this time. So let's zoom in and have a look at that in a little bit more detail. So we're at 100% here, same sort of image, except we've got the eyes more in focus. Again, when you're talking 500mm, the minuteness of trying to nail focus is very, very difficult, and it's very difficult at even f8, you know, as you can see there. But a prime lens is what you want when it comes to taking pictures, and I'd say it's pretty good. So let's have a look at another image. Now this is f4.5. If I must admit, it seems a little bit softer than it should. It could be a little bit sharper. You got to remember it's an old lens though, so it's not doing too bad. But let's zoom in and have a look at the quality. Let's go to 100%. There we go, 100%. You can see it's rendered the text pretty nicely. I don't see a lot of chromatic aberration in these images. There is a little bit, slight tinge, but not much. You can correct that quite easily in Photoshop and Lightroom. And you know, it does give you good sharpness in the corners, if I'm honest. So let's have a look at the same image but in f8, because that's, you guys want to see the comparison, don't you, between 4.5 and f8 to see how sharper it is. So let's have a look at f8. Already it's giving me a slightly better exposure, and if we just get in there 100%, so you guys can see right in the corners, it is a lot sharper. I'd probably say it's twice as sharp being at f8 versus f4.5. The difference with the aperture though is when it's a dark day, you can open up that aperture and get an image that you couldn't normally get with a different type of lens that had a smaller aperture, like an f5.6 to f8, something like that. So you're going to get more sharpness when it comes to going to a small aperture with this lens, certainly. But having the option of changing that aperture back to f4.5 is something interesting happens, and the light starts to fade, gets dark, it's sunset, sunrise. You'll find that extra stop of light more helpful sometimes in certain instances. I also have another image here. Here we have a water fountain duck here, and so here you can see a water fountain duck picture that I've taken in my garden. Sharpness at f4.5 is pretty good here. Oh, it does fall off a little bit here, but you've got to remember minuteness of focus at f4.5. But if I'm going to be honest with you, sharpness is really good across the whole of the frame. Now remember, if you've used a crop sensor camera, right, such as long as it's a Canon one, you're going to get 800mm out of this lens rather than 500. Now, if you're using a Nikon lens, you'll get 750mm. A Canon is a 1.6 crop, gives you 800mm. Now, I will make a disclosure here. You can't really use teleconverters with this lens. I believe you can get hold of the Kenko teleconverter and it does work, albeit very slowly. However, the Canon and the Sigma ones don't work with it. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking of using a teleconverter on this, sure, you can use it in manual, not a problem. But autofocus won't function, unfortunately. So I just wanted to make that disclaimer. So I've got a picture here, obviously, of this duck, F4.5. But I wanted to compare it to a similar lens I used to own, which was a contemporary 150 to 600. When I compared image quality between the lenses at f8, I more or less felt that the quality was more or less the same. Obviously, you've got more elements in the Sigma 150 to 600 to worry about, which means obviously it's not great when you've not got a lot of light to play with, or the sun setting or the sun rising, and you need that extra stop of light to get the image you need. So now this is obviously at 500mm, f4.5, and let's have a look at a comparable image, which is from the Sigma 150 to 600 contemporary at f6.3. Now obviously the aperture is a bit smaller, so your shutter speed will be a bit slower, but it also gets more in focus as well. Keep that in mind, because the aperture is smaller, you get more depth of field. So let's just go back, let me show you what I mean. As you can see, it's quite in focus here, perfectly, but here it's blurred the image out a little bit, not by much, but a little bit. That's the effect of the bigger aperture. The bigger the aperture, the less depth of field you have to play with. So if something's a little bit further away from the main subject you're focusing on, it'll be slightly out of focus because of the small aperture, for the large aperture, sorry. So if you make your aperture smaller, less light in, your shutter speed will go slower, however it will make more things in focus. Now if we look at the difference between that and 6.3 on the 150 to 600 lens, that's set at 500mm as well. I know the image isn't quite the same, but I've tried to get it as close as I can. And if you have a look here, the duck here is perfectly in focus, but that's the difference of 6.3. But if you're looking at the image overall, in terms of quality, to me the image quality is there for both. It's more or less the same. I can't really say one is better than the other. So I just hope this little video gives you an idea of the quality you can achieve from this lens. It's, in my personal opinion, it's just as good as the 150 to 600 contemporary or sport lens that Sigma produce, and it's very close, if not equal, to the 100 to 400 Mark II Canon lens, even with extenders on. At some point I'll do a video on extenders on the 100 to 400 Mark II lens, but I just wanted to demonstrate the quality you can achieve with this lens. I hope this video did give you an insight on quality, and thank you for watching.